So you've seen this before with the vowel features versus spelling. So we looked at this spelling terms for vowels before. And here they are organized the way we organize vowels in linguistics, with the front vowels on the left, back vowels on the right, high vowels at the top, low vowels at the bottom. But now we have lots more spaces filled in for the various vowel sounds we've talked about. So now we see low front a, mid front lax e, high front lax I, and now we finally have that spot for that back low, the back mid lax the short U. But these sounds are not distinguished by duration. They are not actually long and short. And they don't have any name left for and a, the horseshoe and the open O or upside down C. So we have to sort of leave that spot blank if we just think about long O and short O. Now, maybe when you were in school, you learned another system. Some systems say that oo is long double O and is short double O, and that has a difference between oo and u, which we have talked about a little bit. So if you remember that system, that does allow a place for it still doesn't allow a place for a though. So you have to use the short double O, long double O system and speak one of those dialects that don't have a, which is the upside down C or open O. So here they are organized by that spelling system, and this is going to help us get to the last type of vowel we need to look at. So we have a gap here in long I, right? We know how to pronounce all of these: short A, long A, short E, long E, etc. But we don't yet know what the long I would be. We haven't talked about an IPA transcription for that. Now we know it from our spelling system in mile, rice, size, fire, or in by, my, and spy. So let's keep going. Okay, so we see there that short U as a. So something else we can consider here is that A and O are two-part vowels with a vowel and a glide together. So one way we could think about them is like this. So long I, it's in quotation marks, I should have recognized it. Long I is also a diphthong, like A and O, and we can transcribe it this way. In case you're having trouble following, I'm talking about this. We can transcribe it this way, shown here with a vowel and a glide. And we actually have two other diphthongs that we're going to need to talk about. That is these two, ow and oi. So now we're going to get into what diphthongs are. So we said this before. In English, we don't say A, we say A. And so this vowel has two different articulations. The mouth closes a little bit while we say it. It might remind you of the two-part articulations of the affricates ch and j. And O has the same issue. In English, we don't say O, we say O. And even different accents of English have different diphthongs. So in the UK, the standard pronunciation is O. So it starts off differently, but it still has a diphthong. We also talked in class about that Delaware or Maryland pronunciation, ew, which is still a diphthong, even though the parts of it are different. And they're called diphthongs because they have two parts. And di, as you know, in some languages, like you've seen in disaccharides or words like that, means two. And of course, it's related to dos and de and all those Romance words for two as well. So the usual transcription is not the one we've been using so far. It's this other transcription you can see, this transcription you can see here, A and O. The tongue is actually lower for that off glide than it is for ya and wa. So this is the transcription you always see with a lax vowel as the second part instead of a glide. And I actually don't mind the other transcription, but you hardly ever see it. This is the one you almost always see for these vowels. And to tell you the truth, we actually have two more diphthongs, E and U. So in English, we don't have a pure E, U, we say it more E and U. I've never seen them written that way in all my years of reading linguistics. So people talk about how they're diphthongs, but for whatever reason, because I and E are so close in articulation, you never see this transcription, and you should never use this transcription unless you're specifically talking about how to pronounce English, but this is not involved in the transcription of English. So we know these four diphthongs that are always pronounced this way, and now we'll look at some more drastic diphthongs. As I said, these two, E and U, are so undrastic, they're never even written that way. Oh, and I should clear this up, huh? Okay. So we'll start with I. We talked about that already, as sometimes known as long I, although now we know it's a diphthong, seen in all these words. So I, and we could write it with this, that looks like an A and a J of English, but of course it's IPA, I. It has two articulations. So it starts with that ah, that open wide and say ah articulation, and then moves quickly to a glide that's actually somewhere between I and y. And those two are already really close, I and y. So I, that's where that sound comes from. So A and O, the vowel and the glide part are very similar, but I has two very different articulations. In fact, it has two articulations that couldn't be more different. One is low and back, and one is high in front. And then we run into an interesting issue with these drastic diphthongs like I, where the liquids are always pronounced as their own syllables. And we can use that syllabic symbol, that little line under the consonant. So we have dial, and we can put that mark there. So we can get two syllable words here because of these diphthongs. Dial, file, pile, child. Those all seem like two syllable words. Same with R. So fire, higher, empire, choir. Those are all two, or in case of empire, three syllable words. Now it doesn't matter if it's ER or R, it's the effect of the diphthong. So that means higher and higher are homophones. Now we'll take a look at ow, as in lounge, powder, south, how, count, vow, down. Ow. So that has, again, two subsequent articulations, one right after the other. We start with that again, but this time we stay in the back of the mouth and get round. So we go to a glide between and w, ow. So again, these articulations are very different, like I just described. And it has the same issue with when it's followed by liquids. So hour, power, sour. I think the last one should have been shower. I forgot to do a long S. And here again, owl, vowel, towel, scowl. And you see a little question mark there. So I think the R case is pretty clear. You can even look at the English words flower and flower, even though one has an ER marking the second syllable and one just has an R after a diphthong, they're both pronounced this way, flower. With L, I think it's harder to say whether vowel and towel and scowl and howl are exactly the same. I'm sorry, if obviously they are the same. It's harder to tell if they are two syllables. Do people say vowel, towel, or is it just vowel? And I don't think that's a terribly important distinction, but you can think about it. And finally, one more to talk about oi. We see this in void, coin, moist, point, voice, boy, annoy, oyster. And it again has two subsequent articulations. So it starts off with aw. Notice this is not ah, it's a little bit higher and round, and then a glide between I and y. So it's got those two very different articulations. All three of those diphthongs start low, or at least mid-lax, and end up high. And it, one more time, it has this problem where it's followed by liquids. It forces the liquids to be syllabic. So boil, spoil, soil, broil are all two-syllable words. And then an interesting case here with R, so lawyer, foyer, employer, destroyer. Now I think those oil cases are pretty clear. You can look at royal and loyal, where the second syllable is written, or boil and coil, where the second syllable is just a L after a diphthong. About oyer words, I haven't figured out why yet, but they're very rare. There might just be these four in English, just lawyer, foyer, employer, and destroyer. And if you are one of the people who says foyer or foyer instead of foyer, then you've only got three, employer, destroyer, and lawyer. So this case is pretty marginal with the oyers. And there's no cases to compare it with where it's just oi with an R after it. So we do have OIRs in English, but none of them are pronounced oyer. We've got noir and memoir, where they're pronounced to mark their French origin. And then we've got choir, which for some reason has an I sound instead of an oi sound. Okay, so now all we have to do is summarize what we talked about today. So we have these three symbols, l, r, and w. Those symbols aren't surprising, especially if you'd like to use a right side up R. And in this class, you have the right to do so if you want. The big trick here is y, remembering that that symbol that looks like an English J in the IPA represents y, like it does in German, Dutch, and Scandinavian languages. So articulations of those approximants are more open than fricatives, but less than vowels. But the glide approximants, y and w, those are almost vowels. So glides are even a little more open than glide approximants are even a little more open than liquid approximants. So we first looked at the extreme tongue positions, high front E, high back U, and low back A. And because of the teeth and the root of the tongue, we don't have a low front extreme. In between those, we have A and O, which gives you the cardinal vowels. And remember, the symbols for E, A, A are tricky to remember because in English, our vowel pronunciations shifted. So remember, we call those symbols E, A, A, these three right here, E, A, A, and we use them to transcribe those sounds too. And then we have these other sounds, E, A, E, E. Those are our lax versions of A, O, E, U. So symbols might be new. Sorry, this K shouldn't be here. N-E-W, that kind of new. But the pronunciation might be easier to remember because once you figure out what it's close to, it's just E, A, E, U, similar to the letters it looks like. And finally, just now in this video, I talked about the diphthongs of English. We talked about the diphthongs for A, O, and even E, U. And then we talked about these drastic diphthongs, I, ow, and also oi.